I don't know what will happen with the recording. I will send the slides anyway. Yes. So Fourier expansion for the affine subspaces, right? We can create a Fourier expansion for affine subspaces like we did for the subspaces. We just have to add this factor. So notice, if X is element of a affine subspace A, X plus A will be a member of
H.
Right? And then you can see that this is just adding chi gamma of X plus A. So now I'm just going over all elements of H per where where chi gamma of X plus A is 1. So this will again work out. And a similar argument will show that if X is not an element of A, then this will be C. These are very, very similar arguments. So I won't go into that. But now what we have seen is lot of Fourier expansion in this f2 to the power n, and we can talk about many more things. We can talk about sparsity of f. What is sparsity of f? It is the number of Fourier coefficients which are non-zero. We will see how it relates to the complexity of the function. Again, we would think that if the function is sparse, if it is non-zero only on few Fourier coefficients, then it might be easier to learn it. All those things we will see later, but this is a very, very natural definition. This is the number of non-zero coordinates in your vector f. This is the sparsity of f. So now we are viewing our Fourier coefficients as coming from f2 to the power. We can say that f is epsilon granular if f at gamma, if each of my coordinate vectors in gamma in f at are an integer multiple of epsilon. And you remember, right? What was the formula for f at s or f at gamma? This was equal to 1 by 2 to the power n summation what is f at s?
Summation over all s f of x.
Right.
Chi of x.
And since fx and chi sx are integers, f at s will always be a multiple of 1 by 2 to the power. That's why every Boolean function is 2 to the power minus n. Given these definitions, now we can talk about simple corollaries. If A is a subspace of dimension k, then how many Fourier coefficients were non-zero? What was the Fourier expansion of 1A?
All the belonging to A per. So all the gamma belonging to A per.
Yes. How many elements are there in A per? 2 to the power n minus k. Right? Chi gamma x. That means the number of Fourier coefficients which are non-zero are 2 to the power n minus k. It is 2 to the power n minus k sparse, and it is this much granular. Again by the definition. So if what is the Fourier coefficients? If gamma is A per, then it is 1 by 2 to the power n minus k. Otherwise, the Fourier coefficient is 0. Okay. Does this satisfy Parseval's identity? Will the square of these Fourier coefficients add up to 1? Why not?
Because basically over here we are taking it to be in the subspace. I mean,
No, that is not the reason.
The output
Because the
of 1
first one
is
is not Boolean.
0 and 1 and not
Yes.
-1 and 1.
Yes.
No, wait.
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah.
It is 0, 1. That's why this is not coming out to be 1. And you can check that this has to come to be to the power k or whatever needs to be. Like, it will satisfy Parseval's identity, but the sum of the Fourier quotients will not be 1. It could be what you want it. Okay. So, and that's because it's not -1, 1 output, it is a 0, 1. What is the one norm of this function?
That is one.
That is right, to the power n minus k multiplied by 1 by 2 to the power n minus k. Correct. So, what about the Fourier expansion of a decision tree? Do you remember how we represented, how did we come up with a polynomial representation for a decision tree? We showed that the depth of the decision tree is more than the degree or whatever. We constructed a polynomial for the decision tree. How did we construct the polynomial for the decision tree?
By writing the sum of indicator
Indicator polynomials for each
Exactly.
computational path.
For each leaf, for each computational path or each leaf. And now we know that each leaf is a subcube. Right? So I can write this indicator polynomial in terms of the subcube. A subcube is an affine subspace, and I know how to write the indicator of an affine subspace. And this will show not just that degree of f is less than depth of decision tree. What would I know about sparsity of f? How many number of non-zero coefficients will be there? Number of leaves multiplied by,
Yeah.
sorry, each of the leaf is an affine subspace. Correct?
So the number of leaves multiplied by 2 to the power, like, the depth.
Is that correct? What is the dimension of the subspace at a leaf? If the depth is d, there is a subcube, right? What is the size of that subcube?
2 power n minus 2.
Right?
2 power minus t.
Correct. The size of the subcube is to the power n minus d. That means the number of the subcube is n minus d. That means the number of elements which are going to be perpendicular to it are going to be 2 to the power d. Okay, so this I can say is less than s times 2 to the power t, where s is the size of your decision. What about granularity? Each of them is a multiple of
1 by 2 power n minus 2.
1 by 2 to the power n minus d or 1 by 2 to the power d?
D, a D.
Right? So they will be 2 to the power n to the power minus d. Okay, so this is one small idea of how we can simplify things. We looked at the Fourier transform, we looked at the subcubes, we constructed the basic objects, Fourier transform of basic objects like subspace and affine subspaces that allowed us to talk about the Fourier transform of a decision. let's take a break of 5 minutes. Let's meet at 3:05. Let's say let's meet at 3:05, and then we will continue working our way with this f to the power n. Okay, sounds good. The rank of the function is defined as the dimension of span of SF, where SF is basically sets whose Fourier coefficient is not zero. Why would we worry about this kind of a thing? Right? Let me talk about why all these things. Why are we doing each of these things? Intuitively,
So, what exactly do we mean by span of SF here? I mean, how can we take linear combinations of these by representing in that
gamma as
by
elements of F.
representing in that gamma form?
Exactly. That is why we started with the gammas. But now, since you know that gamma and sets are the same thing, I can keep talking about S as an element of vector spaces, and you would know what that means. So, if I write my function as x1, is that a simple function? It's a dictator function, right? So it seems like a very, very simple function. Now, suppose I give you a function on n variables, but its Fourier expansion, its polynomial representation is like this. Still, you would say that the function is simple, right? Why is it simple?
Degree is one, and it just depends on two agents.
It just depends on, yes, it just depends on two variables, right? And now, suppose I give you a function x1, x2. Even then, the thinking would be, yeah, the function should be simple in some sense. What is that sense? If I include a new variable now, call y1 is equal to x1, x2, and y2 is equal to, let's say, x2. Okay, let's talk about just two dimensions. X1, x2 corresponds to which vector?
1, 1,
1, 1. X2 corresponds to
0, 1.
0, 1. That means this is also a what of f2 square?
Basis.
This is also a basis, right? And in some sense, if I change my variables to be y1 and y2, then my f is very, very simple. It is just y. So in some structural sense, f is equal to x1, x2 is simple as f is equal to y. Under a change of variables, my function will become very, very simple. Like you have basis change in your matrices, in your vector spaces, when you do the basis change, your matrix can become diagonal, and you will say, oh, life has become easy. Many, many properties are basis independent, and then things are very, very easy. For example, your trace is sum of eigenvalues. How do you show that? You would show that trace is sum of diagonal entries, but then if you take a basis change so that your matrix become diagonal, then your eigenvalues are in the diagonal, and then you show that trace does not change under change of basis. So what I'm saying is that this is a general mathematical strategy. You have some kind of an operation which preserves lot of properties. In linear algebra, it is change of basis. Here, this is substitution of variables. And when we say that a function has low rank, that basically means that there are some small number of variables over which the function depends. Now, you could write your function as x1 plus x2 plus x6 plus x2 x6, so on and so forth. It might have a huge Fourier spectrum. But if the rank is small, that means there is some substitution. Y is equal to x1, x2, x3, y1, y2 is equal to something, so that my function is just my f is just a function of y1 plus y2 plus y2, y3, or a small number of things. This is why rank is important. Under some kind of a transformation, the function becomes simple. The rank is small, then it is same as saying it depends on small number of. If I tell you that a function depends on small number of variables, you will be accepted. Now, instead of saying it depends on small number of variables, I will say its rank is small. That means under some transformation, it will depend on small. And that's why rank becomes simple. And again, once function becomes simple, it might be easy to learn, it might be easy to deal with in cryptography and thousands. So once we structurally know that there is some grasp, some handle we have on the function, then we can simplify. So rank is an equivalent of number of variables in some different cases. So I guess I have answered this. So let's move on. One of the important question is that, or a natural question which might arise is that if the number of non-zero Fourier coefficients are small, can we say that it depends on small number of variables? Are there any questions about what is sparsity and what is rank? Everyone is okay? Okay. Once we know sparsity and rank, now the question I am asking is, given that my function has small sparsity, can I say that its rank is small? Can
Yes.
I say? Okay. So then let's talk about this. What is the minimum possible rank in terms of sparsity? Suppose I tell you that my sparsity is k. Can I say that my rank is small? Can I say no? What is minimum possible rank? So can I say that if there are at least k non-zero Fourier coefficients, then can I say that my rank is at least something? What can I say about rank? Suppose k is 100. Can I have one variable? Can my rank be 1 and my sparsity be 100?
So
Could you,
because
could you once repeat the definition of rank once?
Rank is what happens is very good. So let me just clarify things. SF, let's say this is the set of all subsets such that f at s is non-zero. So this is the subsets, or these are the parities on which my function value depends. You can think of it like that. And then rank is the dimension of span of SF, because SF need not be a vector space. I will a subspace. I will make a subspace out of SF. Again, subsets will map to these elements of f to the power n. And when I talk about dimension, I mean the dimension of that subspace. Right? So, for example,
What do you mean by span here?
Okay. Let's say f is equal to x1 plus x2. Let's talk about the rank of this. What is SF in this case? in terms of these vectors in f2 to the power n?
1, 0, and 0, 1.
1, 0, and 0. Right? Now, span of SF is all the vectors which can be obtained by linear combination. Correct?
Okay.
What is the span? 0, 0,
1, 1.
1, 0, 1. Correct? What is the dimension of this?
4.
What is the dimension of this?
2, 2.
That means this function has rank. And now you kind of see that, right? If rank is R, then your subspace, how many elements can be there in the subspace? 2 to the power R. If you have R vectors in f2 to the power n, what will be this? What will be the number of elements in the span of those? At most 2 to the power R. R is actually the R are going to be linearly independent. So if you
Yes.
have R basis elements, exactly 2 to the power R elements are going to be there in your subspace. And if rank is, it is the dimension of span of SF, that means SF should be inside that subspace, right? So let's say V1 to VR are the linearly independent basis of this, then total number of elements are 2 to the power R, and SF is obviously a subspace or subset of span of V1 to VR. That means cardinality of SF is less than 2 to the power R. This is same as saying rank is more than. If I had just 2 vectors, then the number of Fourier coefficients which can be non-zero would be at most 4. Right? If I had 3, if my function depends on just 3 parities, how many S's can I construct with 3 parities? 8. If I have 4 linearly independent vectors or 4 subsets, the number of parities I can create with them is 16. Correct? But if there are more than 16 Fourier coefficients which are non-zero, that means my rank is then it cannot be. And this is what is written. Right? So can you give me an example of a function? Let's worry about the function whose domain is entire real numbers, such that rank is exactly equal to log. Sorry, rank is exactly equal to log.
X1 plus X2 till summation of all Xi's.
Okay, if I take summation of all Xi's, what is the sparsity?
Sparsity is n.
And
What is the rank?
Oh, okay. The rank.
So it is clear that rank cannot be more than n, right? Because the dimension of f2 to the power n is n. So let's
Okay,
look
then
at
choose the
So
function
all the
which is the
products-
summation of all the
yeah,
subsets,
all the possible products.
exactly
all the partial
summation.
parities.
Yes, correct. This function, the sparsity will be n, 2 to the power n, but rank will be n. But the problem is that I don't like this function. This function might not be Boolean. The point is, interesting connection between rank and sparsity will happen only if I allow my functions to be Boolean. So can you think of a Boolean function where rank is equal to log of sparsity. Here you have kept all the Fourier coefficients to be equal, but I don't need them to be equal,
So
right?
isn't it true that for any x summation over all s phi s of x is, I mean, zero or something? Is there something like that?
Okay, yes, what you are saying is true, but you can come up with an easier example. Let's say I want the answers to be -1, comma 1. So have you seen a function whose sparsity is very, very high?
Not all equal.
Okay, you're going to very difficult places, but look at OR function or AND function.
Okay.
It will have non-zero Fourier coefficients. All coefficients of OR are non-zero. You can prove that. So OR, the sparsity will be n, but the 2 to the power n rank would be. So here we don't get any advantage for the function being put. The rank and the sparsity can be at most, it is clear from the definition that rank should be more than log k, and there are functions where rank is equal to. Let's ask the opposite question. What is the maximum possible rank in terms of sparsity? If the sparsity is k, then what can you say about rank? Can rank be k square?
Maximum of k comma n.
Okay. Rank is definitely less than max of sparsity n. Very good. Can you give an example of a function where sparsity and rank are actually equal?
The one you gave on the previous slide, summation
Right.
x1 plus x2 plus up to xn.
Very good. Summation x. Right. What about a Boolean function? This is not Boolean. Can you give me a Boolean function where sparsity and rank are equal as a function, as some function of n?
All parities, they have same sparsity
Parities
and
have
rank.
parities. No. See, as a function of n, right? So see, for parity, sparsity is 1 and rank is also 1, right? This is what you are saying.
Yes.
Correct. But this will also be 2, right? Correct. This for if my conjecture was rank is less than square root k, even then this example
Okay,
will not
okay,
be a
okay.
counter example, right?
So we want a tight example. Kind of.
Yes, you want a tight example. Okay. Actually, why don't you think of a function where rank is much bigger than log k? Can you think of a function where rank is much bigger than? Because most of the functions have actually full Fourier, how should I say it, full Fourier spectrum. Even if you look for majority, at least half of the things would be non-zero. So most of the time, the number of non-zero Fourier coefficients for a Boolean function are of the order of 2 to the power n, and the rank cannot be more than n. So it seems like r is equal to log k for many of those. So let's change the function, change the question. Can you think of any function where r is substantially bigger than log? Okay, let's worry about addressing function. Do you remember addressing function? Yes, no,
Yeah, yes.
right? So what was the addressing function? I look at my input as an address which is of t bits and a target which is of what size?
2 to the power t.
2 to the power t. So this address points to a value here, and that is going to be my answer. Uh, do I need to explain more about addressing function? Everyone remembers what the function was? Okay. So now, knowing this, what is the polynomial representation of addressing function? Let's say the address variables are x1 to xt and target variables are y1 to y2 to the power t.
Okay, so that they would be like indicators of all the addresses possible and corresponding y values.
Exactly.
Summation over all.
Summation over I equal to 1 to 2 to the power t, yi indicator that x1 to x2 are pointing to I. Do you agree? Does everyone see that this is the polynomial representation? You can think of the decision tree, right? The usual decision tree, the decision tree which makes sense for addressing function is x1, x2, make the complete binary tree, figure out all possible addresses, all possible address bits. As soon as you know what is your address, query the respective y's. That should be your decision tree for the addressing. If this is the decision tree, then this should be your polynomial representation for the addressing function. And even this is very simple, right? This is just 1 plus x1 by 2, 1 minus x1 by 1, x2 by 2, depending on whether you want it to be 1 or 0, right? What do you want x1, x2, xt to be? Is the polynomial representation clear? Some part is not clear. Please let me know. I can explain it again. If everyone is fine, then except Odette, can someone tell me what is the sparsity of this function? What is the sparsity of this indicator function?
Two to the power t.
Yes, because no term will cancel, right? Look at the form of indicator, right? What is the indicator that x1 is equal to 1, x2 is equal to -1, x3 is equal to 1? Okay, let's try to calculate this. What is the indicator of that? x1 equal to 1, x2 equal to -1, x3 equal to 1?
One plus x1 by 2 times.
Right? This is the indicator. And obviously, each of the terms have different, when you multiply, each of the term will have a different, will correspond to a different monomial. So the terms can never cancel. That means you will have 2 to the power t non-zero Fourier coefficients, and then you are multiplying them by yi. In the inside two summations, none of the things could cancel. That means the sparsity is exactly how many terms are there?
2 to the power t.
And every term is giving you how many Fourier coefficients? To the
2 to
power
the
t,
power t.
2 to
right?
the
So
power
what is the
t.
sparsity of addressing?
2 to the power 2t.
Correct. And what about rank?
2 to
Rank cannot be more than uh, the number of variables. And in this case, rank will actually exactly, okay, let's figure out the rank. What is the rank here?
So how can you say that none of those will cancel? So we have multiplied 2 to the power t into 2 to the power t. So, but between terms, it won't cancel.
Because yi's are different, right? The first
Yeah,
term will have
yi.
y1, second term will have y2. So how can two Fourier coefficients, one corresponding of just y1, one corresponding of y2, how can they cancel? They are variables, right?
Okay, they are variables.
They cannot cancel.
Okay.
Right? And now your rank is at least 2 to the power t. Correct? Because it will have, why is rank at least 2 to the power t?
Because corresponding to those address, we have all the independent, like,
Yeah, you should have y1 in your span. You should have y2. You should have y2 to the power t. Correct? Each of the target bits should be there, right? So these should definitely be there in the span. The coefficient of y1 is non-zero, coefficient of y2 is non-zero, coefficient of y to the power t is non-zero. And these are all linearly independent, right? These are all different variables. Now you see that the rank is actually square root of sparsity. R is approximately square root of. It is much bigger than log. So what we have seen is that rank should lie between log k and k, right? This was, again, both of these bounds were easy to give, that rank should lie between k and log k. This is tight. Actually, we don't know of anything which is better than addressing function. We don't know of any function whose rank is better than square root of. What we are going to prove as an application of things we are doing. So we are learning this F2 structure. We are going to prove that for a Boolean function, rank is actually less than square root k. Very close to what is the optimum. Notice that this is again giving you a specialty about Boolean functions. If the function was not Boolean, then your rank and sparsity could be equal. But if the function is Boolean, then we can say something way tighter. If you have 100 Fourier coefficients, non-zero Fourier coefficients, then your function should depend on some 10 variables. Not 10 variables in the sense of x1, x2, but you can apply a change of basis, or you can change your variables in terms of parities. And then suddenly my function only depends on at most around 10 parities. And then your life would be simple. The number of variables your function depends on is very simple. So this is the structural property we will be able to show after doing a lot of analysis. This will be done later, what we are doing is the groundwork for this, to be able to come up with this structure. But you should see that, oh wow, there is something special happening. When the output was real, then rank and sparsity could be equal, x1 plus x2 plus xn. But if the function is Boolean, then our structure is very, very strong. If the sparsity is k, then my function only depends on some root k parities, some constant root k or root k log k. Root k log k is very, very close to root k. Right? Log k is very, very small. And suddenly your algorithms will improve because the number of variables or number of parities you want to care about are small. This is applications in cryptography, learning theory, many, many other different. This is saying that, intuitively, this is saying that if your function is sparse, it depends on small number of parities, then I can capture it, I can learn it fast. That is the intuition which comes out. So again, we will do some more groundwork for what we want to do, but before that, any questions? Okay. So again, this is going to be more practice with our functions and looking at the domain as a set, looking at a f2 to the power n, and seeing how we can simplify our Fourier expansion. One of the important tool in studying the functions is called restriction of the functions. The most common restriction is on a subcube. What does it mean? You have seen it in decision tree. If I fix some variables, fix value of some variables, my function will be dependent on the remaining variables. This is the restricted function. This is called a restriction. So I have variables x1 to xn. I can say, oh, my x1 is equal to 1, xn equal to -1. Then the restricted function is a function on n minus 2 variables. This is what I mean by restricting the function. Here, I am restricting on a subcube where x1 is equal to 1 and xn is equal to 1. If I have a decision tree, a deterministic decision tree for a function, what do I know about the restricted function here? If I know the values of x1, x2, xk, then I know the value of the function. That means my restricted function is
It will be a decision tree with the, depth less than by 2, and then would be some fixed branches that we will take into the decision tree. That's
Right.
according to the assignment x1 equals
Right,
to 1, x1 equals to -1.
that is true, but what do I know about all the inputs which come to that leaf? The function value on that leaf is fixed, right? Because this is a decision tree. If I'm outputting 1 here, that means the function value is 1 for all the inputs when I fix these variables. So the restricted function is constant at every leaf. Right? This is just, again, I'm giving you more examples of how restrictions would arise. Right? Let's talk about the notation and then we can look at more examples. Okay. So now I have to fix a subset of variables. The subset of variables I am going to fix is called J. Okay. If I'm fixing J, then my function will remain just on J bar. This is the variables on which function value will now, restricted function will depend. The variables in J will be fixed. Sorry. The opposite of that, the function restriction will fix the values in J bar, and then I will have a function on J, on the variables in J. Okay, so the notation is fj comma z of y is equal to f of y comma z. Think of this, f of j comma z is a function from -1 to the power j. What have I done? I have taken j bar and assigned them values according to small z. Let's take a lot of examples so that this notation becomes clear. Let us take the OR function, which depends on 5 variables. Suppose I want to restrict it on first 3 variables, and I want to assign x4 to 1 and x5 to 1. What will be my restricted function? It will be OR of 3, right? Because x4 is equal to 1, x5 is equal to 1. None of them have given me indication that OR could be -1. So now it depends on OR of 1, 2, and 3. If I set it to x4 is equal to -1 and x5 equal to 1, then what will be my restricted function?
-1.
-1, right? So OR 5 on 1, 2, 3, when I'm restricting it to -1, 1 is basically a constant function -1.
So, I mean, expressing this in the way of fyz that you just showed in the last slide. Say, supposing rather than x4 equals to 1 and x5 equals to 1, we have set x3 equals to 1 and x5 equals to 1.
Yeah, so you are right that here yz are not concatenated in the correct order, right? So when I write y comma z, think of y being assigned to things in j and z being assigned to j bar. Okay? So there is a permutation involved here. You are completely right, but we know what it means, right? Because y is an assignment on j and z is an assignment on j bar, so we will map to that. Similarly, if I talk about parity and I restrict it to some parts, then what I am doing is calculating the parity on the remaining variables, multiplying it with all other variables. Let me know if any of this is not clear. This is just to give you examples. This should make it clear. Again, for the OR function, if I want to look at it as function on j, j is some subset of n, where rest of the variables I'm setting out according to z, then if z is equal to all ones, I will keep remaining with have to compute OR function. If any of the things is -1, then my answer is restricted function becomes constant. So suppose I take the majority of 5, I restrict it to 1, 3, and 5, such that x2 equal to 1 and x4 equal to -1. What will be this function?
Again, majority over 1, 3, 5 variables.
Correct. It will be majority over 1, 3, 5. Right? Because both of these were equal. x2 equal to 1 and x4 equal to -1. So this restriction is clear. Now let's see how does it affect our Fourier transform. Okay, so why don't you tell me what is the Fourier transform of majority with 3 variables? Come up with this. There will be some coefficient of constant term, some coefficient of x1 plus x2 plus x3. It's a symmetric function, right? I want these four Fourier coefficients. What about the constant coefficient? What is the constant coefficient for majority? That's easy.
1.
No. What is the constant coefficient? It is sum of fx. 1 by 2 to the power n. Right? If majority is over 3 variables, how many inputs will give me value 1 and how many inputs will give me variable value -1?
It should be 0.
0. You will actually see even this is 0. Now tell me the coefficient for x1 plus x2 plus x3. Are people calculating or waiting for my answer? Okay. Anyone? Coefficient of x1 plus x2 plus x3.
1 by 4.
No, it is going to be half.
1 by 4.
Okay, let's check.
Oh,
How many inputs are there where x1 is equal to 1? A total 8 inputs. How many of them where x1 is equal to 1?
4 inputs.
4 inputs. How many of them will give me answer 1?
4 inputs.
All 4 will give me value 1 when x1 is equal to 1.
Three of them.
Three of them. Right? 3 of them will give me answer 1.
3 will give -1 and 1 will give 1.
No. If x1 equal to 1, 3 of them will give me 1. If there are more ones, then I'm answering 1. Right? And similarly, when x1 is equal to -1,
Oh, okay. So when x1 is -1, I calculate.
okay, but it will be -half or something. But yeah. So the function values will get coordinated in 6 places, and they will be opposite in two places. So 4 divided by 8, you will get. What is the coefficient for x1, x2, x3? How can you calculate the coefficient of x1, x2, x3? Come on, that is easy.
By Parseval.
2.
Yeah. So what is it?
1 by 8.
Hey, come on. You know how to square, right?
Root 3 by 4.
What are you guys doing?
Yeah.
So alpha square plus half square plus half square plus half square is
Okay,
equal to
yeah.
1. What is alpha?
Half.
Yeah,
1 by 2.
right?
Plus, it would be plus minus 1 by 2, no?
Sorry. Yeah,
If you're just using Parseval.
Sorry, yeah. So it will come out to be minus.
If you're just using Parseval, then it will be plus minus.
Right. You are right. It will come out to be minus. You can check that. Okay. So this will be the Fourier expansion of majority. And now, if I restrict x2 and x3 to 1 and -1, what do you expect? I should get x1, right? If I'm equally assigning, I'm assigning x2 to 1 and x3 to -1, then my majority should just depend on x1.
So
And
it
this is
would be
what
majority of.
majority of x1 is just x1, right? Majority of just one variable is that variable itself, right? And that you can actually see just by substituting, right? What I will do, x2 and x3 are substituted as 1 and -1. Substitute x2 as 1, x3 as -1. Here also x2 as 1, x3 as -1. What happens is the coefficients of x2 and x3 are clubbed together. The coefficients of x1 and x1, x2, x3 are clubbed together. Right? And I get my answer as x1. So when I restrict my function, my Fourier coefficients get merged. This is what should happen, and this is what is happening here, right? You are assigning x2 equal to 1, x3 equal to 1. Now, what happens to the coefficient of phi? If I'm assigning x2 and x3, then coefficient of x2 will also get added here. Coefficient of x3 will also get added here with some plus minus sign. And the coefficient of x2, x3 will also get added. All of this will contribute to the coefficient of phi. When I say added, I don't really mean added with some sign, right? Depending on how you have assigned x2 and x3. But you see that this is how any restriction, I can come up with a Fourier representation of any restriction. Right? And this is what I am going to write. I'm going the Fourier coefficient of S, once I have restricted J, restricted to function on J such that J bar is assigned Z. Remember what happened here? I took every possible combination of x2, x3 and added that to phi. The same thing is going to happen here. I take any subset of J bar and add with corresponding term. So this should become obvious to you from the previous example. You see that this is what is going to happen. My F was summation S yes, question.
What is S there in the right hand side of this equation?
Oh, so this is a capital S, right?
What is
This
S
is the
on the
full-
right hand side in the S union T?
S union T, the same subset, right? Think of S as some subset of J. For all S subset of J, I am writing this equation. See, Fj comma Z is a function from -1 to the power J, right? That means my Fourier coefficients will all be subsets of capital J. So I'm coming up with these Fourier coefficients. I'm saying this is the formula to come up with Fourier coefficients of J. Fj restricted. So is this box clear now? And this box can be written. There another way to write this box is to think of this box as a function. That means for all S subset of J, I can define this function. What is this function saying? On an input Z, what is the Fourier coefficient of S of the function f j restricted to Z? Okay. So this expression, I am thinking of it as a polynomial in Z. This is again notation. There is nothing special here. There is I'm just defining a new notation. The advantage of this notation is that now suddenly, remember that this is what we have learned. We are writing this as a function now. And then we notice that for this function, if I want to find, see again, this is a function from -1 to the power j bar. That means the Fourier coefficients will be for all subsets of j bar. So for all t subset of j bar, this is how I can come up with the Fourier coefficient. This is written right here. Fourier coefficient of t is f at su. But looking at it as a polynomial, it's easy to come up with the expectation. Because expectation of this quantity is expectation of this, and now we know that expectation of chi t z is 0 if t is non-zero. That means this is going to be f at s. Similarly, this quantity is this just by Parseval. So I know what is going to be my Fourier coefficient in expectation if I pick Z uniform. Remember, we talked about restriction. Restriction was clear, and it was very clear what will happen to the Fourier coefficient if I fix it to a particular Z. But now if I view it as a polynomial, this allows us to talk about expected value of this Fourier coefficient if I pick Z uniform. And I get these two. Today, I will stop here. One thing to remember is that you just don't need to restrict on a set of variables. You can even restrict your function on a set of parities in the analogous way. Remember, this is what we learned. There was this basis transformation where variables went to parities. We could assign x1, x2, x3 is equal to y1, x3, x1 is equal to y2, and so on. If this is the case, we can also extend the definition of restriction on a collection of parities. My time is already up, so I will not go into this. We will cover it when we come back. But what we have learned is that we have f. Once we look at the Fourier transform as a vector, we can talk about many of its properties. It's 1 norm, 2 norm, sparsity of f, rank of f, so on and so forth. And there are interesting relations between them. One way to study them is to look at the restrictions. We have seen restriction on a collection of variables. We will see restriction on a collection of parities and then prove very, very interesting theorems. As an application, we will see two important things. We will show that there is a better bound on rank. We thought that rank is between log k and k. We will be able to prove that rank is actually less than square root k. Similarly, we will learn a better, we will see a better learning algorithm. Previously, we have seen that if we know that our function is epsilon 2 concentrated on some particular f, then we can learn it fast. What if we don't know f? We just know that our function is concentrated on some small number of subsets. We can still learn it very, very fast. And that would be gold right level. And these will be application of whatever we have learned yesterday and today. This finishes the lecture from my side.